Welcome everyone to the next program in our career series here at Berkeley Law. Once again, Wilson Sonsini has been kind enough to donate some more time to us to talk about issues generally, and then talk about what they've done to address their particular issues or the industry's issues. And we have Kara Wenzel's here with us today, and something very, I think, unique and rare. I've been around this industry 30 years. And you don't find this position in many firms. In fact, I ask around and we can only come up with one other firm that has anything like it. And so I think it's important to understand, one, what the position is, and two, why this position exists. And so Kara Wenzel is the Career Development Manager in the DC office of Wilson Sonsini. So Kara, like I said, as we were talking before, this title is not normal in law firms. In a lot of places it might be, but what does it mean in a law firm to have a career development manager?
Sure. Thanks, Wayne. It is a really cool job, I think. I'm a little biased, but you're right. It's fairly new to the practice of law. So basically what I do is help associates figure out where they're going and how to get there in the broadest sense possible. So that could mean determining the best niche within their practice, with an eye toward moving in-house if that's what they want to do, or making partners someday. Or maybe they decide they want to switch practice groups and try something else entirely. So we work out a strategy to try that out or get there. So it's a really multifaceted role. We do a little bit of cross-staffing, a lot of one-on-one coaching with associates, and also speaking with partners to help them refine their expectations and make sure that communication about, how the work is getting done and what people should be doing is clear. So it's a really fun, rewarding role that we now have in several of our practice groups here at Wilson Sonsini.
Well, when you're coming through law school, now you're being asked to think about your career path, maybe middle of your first year. Previously, you at least had till the end of your first year, maybe to the beginning of your second year. The thing that all of those timeframes have in common is you still haven't seen your upper level courses. You still haven't seen the nuances. You've seen foundational courses. And students come to me all the time and said, well, don't know exactly what I want to do. I kind of like this class. I kind of like that class. Somebody said, well, I liked that class, but it could have been because I liked the professor, maybe not the material. And the great statement he made afterwards was, am I going to pick my rest of my life based on the first professor that I liked? Like, oof, that's a sad, sad statement. And I didn't have a good answer, so that scared me. So how do you guide a student kind of at this beginning process to think about a practice group or think about a firm that might have the practice group that they're interested in?
So it's a tough question because it just involves a lot of reflection and research and then trying things out. When we think about the legal profession, it's an apprenticeship. It's a very old profession that we've always known people learn on the job as they're going. So that's okay. That includes law school and your first many years of practice. So if you follow the logic of just kind of going about pursuing a practice area based on a class that you liked or did well in, it might not fit your lifestyle. The actual day-to-day work of that practice might not be a good fit for you. So I really loved criminal law, for instance. I thought it was exciting and I did really, really well in federal taxation, but I guarantee I would not have been a good tax or criminal lawyer. So what I tell people is you have just a really big research task ahead of you, but different kind of research than, the type that you would do for your law school courses. You want to start with some introspection. What do you like? What motivates you? And how do you get satisfaction at work? And if you haven't had a full-time job before, that can be a little bit tough, but you can still think about, what do you already know about yourself? Are you an introvert or extrovert? And of those past jobs you've had, even part-time, which one made you feel fulfilled? Which one did you feel like you could get in the zone and just enjoy doing that work? Are you a detail-oriented person or bigger picture? Do you like writing, like original work, or do you prefer editing? Do you like working with data and spreadsheets or with experts in science and technology concepts? Do you like talking to people, hosting meetings, or getting people to do things? And then even further from that, do you like public speaking, presenting, appearing in court, maybe, or the idea of it? Are you a big risk taker, or do you prefer to make smaller, more manageable risks? And then are you a creative problem solver, or do you like having at least a little bit of precedent to go on when you're thinking about a problem? So at the end of the day, any lawyers, that's why we're here. We need to either see the landscape ahead and predict the risk or the problems, or solve the ones that have already happened for our clients. So I always advise people to actually start making a list of these things, anything that's important to you, that comes up to you about the way you might want to work. And then start research. So there are lots of resources, some great general online resources. Most people use Chambers Associate, hg.org. Firsthand used to be known as Vault, that your law school may subscribe to. And most likely your law school career center will have a lot of these in their website. And there are also some very specific practice guides built by legal recruiting firms and others. So that's a good way to just do a little bit of initial exploration, because those sites will give real anecdotes and sometimes quotes from lawyers. But you're also going to want to start talking to people. Again, once you have some sense of your interests, I would try to pick a mentor to develop. So it could be any lawyer. A professor of yours is great. Someone from your law school's career services or another office at the school, or just someone you know from previous lives, and start to connect those dots. Like, tell them, so I'm an extrovert. I really like talking to people. I don't think I want to go into court, but I'm interested in this, and this subject. Like, tell me, what do you think? What should I consider? And there's no one size fits all rule. Like, there are plenty of introverted litigators and extroverted transactional attorneys. Um, but, at least having something to go on can help you make sense of the broad forest for the trees, and start talking to people, do that soothing, and you'll also begin to do this naturally through interviewing.
I think that leaves, first of all, it's the best list of lawyer personality traits that if you just had a nice online form people could fill out, and it would tell them at least what not to do. Maybe it won't tell you what to do, but it can tell you what not to do. It's easy in my world. I'm like, if you've ever said I went to law school because I was told there'd be no math, you probably don't want to apply to be a patent litigator. It's not going to go well. Now, what else that means, everything else is open to you, but just something is off the table. But what I really like about that list is that if you go to an event, you start listening to lawyers talk about their day, there are some ways that you can pick up that information about, okay, this practice is a tax transactional practice. Guarantee you're not going to learn anything about it in law school, but if I ask questions, I can learn what they're doing day to day, and then kind of match it to what I've thought about. Here's my personality type. Ooh, I like working with other people. Wait, tax lawyers work with other people? That's interesting. I thought they just worked alone, but here they're working with all these other groups. And it's a great way to think about structuring your questions, or at least structuring the answers that you're getting from people or the conversations you overhear.
Yeah, you can be working in the most interesting and exciting subject to you, but if the job does not fit your personality, it's going to be super draining. Like if you're that extrovert who needs to talk to people and the job is literally sitting at a computer and writing or doing something at the desk, not really interacting for 12 hours a day, you're going to be miserable eventually. So,
Well, and you also mentioned, the demands of your life.
mhm.
Are you completely flexible? Do you need a structured schedule? And I know in my world, for example, in patent law, well, people think patent law, but there are two different pieces of it.
Yeah.
The prosecution piece, which is predictable, which is great for remote work. It's, fairly lonely job in my opinion, because you're doing most of that work yourself, a little bit of conversation and then a whole lot of work, versus litigation, which is more unpredictable, um, versus, M&A work, which is completely unpredictable.
Yes, that is one of, if you had a scale, M&A would be on the very far side of completely unpredictable.
Yes. So those are great things to know. What do you need for your lifestyle? What do you need for you know, for your family, for your happiness? Those are great things to listen for when you start talking to lawyers. And if you're asking them the right questions, one of my favorite one is, kind of what does your day, your week, your month look like?
Yeah, yeah, ask them that.
Um, and then fitting it into your lawyer personality test. I really think you should put that online so people can take it. So,
I'll work on it. I'll see. I'll do some test cases. We'll see how it goes.
um, well, so look, law, these students have a chance to talk to lawyers, going to start sorting through practices, things like that. I mean, how do they decide, what, I guess maybe the best way to ask this is, how do they decide what firms to then apply for, especially in this new world where, you're trying to target certain firms by sending in resumes early on? How do you know where to send a resume? Because just the blanket, the whole industry is not going to work. So if you wanted to send out 8, 10 targeted resumes, how do you make those choices in your first year?
Great question. And it can be tough to narrow down. If you're really unsure, I think one idea is to try to look for firms that specifically design their summer programs for exploration, because some firms will just assign their summer associates directly to one practice group, and that's it. That's who you work with all summer. And if you were to get a full-time offer, that's where you'd be going. Others will let you pick maybe two. Maybe they have to be in the same general department, like litigation, but you do, a few weeks with complex lit and then a few weeks with white collar. I'm not making this up. And then others have a broader rotation system, or use a totally free market system for their summer associates, meaning you can go and work with whomever you like in any practice group in the whole firm. So if you want to do some sort of something in between, or give yourself a chance to try out more, look for firms that permit some type of rotation. And they would either highlight that on their summer associate portion on their careers website, or if they don't make it explicit, that's definitely one of the first questions you'd want to ask in an interview. How do they do assignments? How does the work get doled out as a summer? And then also as an associate, because some firms still do that when you first join the firm as an associate. For instance, my firm, Wilson Sonsini, in the corporate department, we have the launch program. And what that means is if you join corporate in one of our Bay Area offices, you are not assigned to a practice group for your first 2 years. You get a chance to try out pretty much as many as you like and just kind of see what's a better fit. Now, you still will have to have decided corporate as opposed to any of the other groups we have, but it's a nice chance to then more formally refine where you're headed. And then lastly, if you want that chance to really take have some more support, at least with the way that the firm guides associates. You want to look for firms that really support career development. And this can be, in structural ways, like an actual career development support system, like what I do at Wilson, and that those people will have as part of their job, the role of helping you determine and then just kind of refine your path as you advance at the firm. But it can also help in cultural ways, and you would be looking for a strong mentoring program that would last throughout your time at the firm, not just the first 6 months or a year. And you got to really talk to people who either have worked there in the past or currently working there about their mentorship and how that happens. What does it look like? How often do they talk to their mentors and about what? And how helpful has that been? So there are lots of ways to go about it, but those are just a few ideas that I would try.
So you've probably heard, or maybe students don't share everything with you, they share with me, but often they think this idea of rotation is a trap, that
Mm.
that really the firm wants you to come in and say, I am a dedicated life sciences patent litigator, and that's all I want to do. I don't need to talk to anybody else. You're the person I want to work for. And I'm not sure where all the myths come from. Probably at some point in time, somebody did say that and it was true. But my experience is these rotation programs are really, they're well designed because you're picking up multiple areas within the same area, like you mentioned, corporate law. Whether it's the different flavors, you're still learning. It's still foundational. It's not wasted. But I heard you did mention that, well, you're in corporate, not corporate and litigation. So
Some firms do permit that, but I think most kind of limit you somewhat to pick some angle.
so
Mhm.
what you're suggesting is that students need to at least understand in broad strokes, kind of at the same level that their first year courses are, litigation, corporate, at least get on the right floor of the law firm, and then you can pick nuanced practice areas from within that. But you don't need to pick, I'm going to do white collar criminal defense litigation the day you show up.
Right, right. And I think you also have to, I know there's a lot of pressure about 2L summer, that this is kind of the make or break, like figure it out then if you haven't already. But I don't know that that's exactly true. I think there are also other chances to try other things, both in tandem with before or right after the 2L summer. Most schools have great clinic programs and externship programs. So you should, I encourage everyone to take advantage of those and try out if you have like a possible contender, maybe a second or third practice area that you're interested in, but you just aren't really sure would be a good fit. Like try to map out the rest of law school. Like when could I squeeze in a clinic if my school has one or an externship? I have the benefit of being in DC. We have the federal government, so there's so many great places to work. But every school has some option like that to work with real lawyers who can help you really figure out, if it could be a good fit and give you the benefit too of outside of the summer associate program, perhaps getting a little bit more of their attention. Mhm.
Well, we kind of talked about practice areas, but in some discussions, I see another way for at least young lawyers to start thinking about their careers. And I think law firms usually refer to them as industry verticals.
Mhm.
So for the aviation industry or for the sports industry, we do, kind of a one-stop shop, whether you're building a stadium or negotiating a player contract, whether you're leasing planes or building planes, we do those. Can industry verticals help students in any way?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And part of your job can be to explore that in the interviews as well, if it's not very clear on the career sites. for different firms. So our firm, for instance, one of our groups within corporate focuses on just certain types of medical technology, mostly medical devices. And they do the gamut. They advise first circle, like very early stage companies, all the way through to public. Some of them do public company work. And they do deal work, M&A. They do, they've had some IPOs they've advised on. So those lawyers have the broadest type of corporate practice you could possibly have. And some of those clients are then referred on to other groups within our firm who do, IP. Yeah, I will admit it is a little bit tough to be a litigator and a corporate lawyer. I'm not sure very many people make a successful practice out of that. That said, regulatory practices that in which you'd focus on usually a particular sector, industry type of client, have a very different way of advising clients. So you're advising them both with risk assessment in the way that they run their business and compliance with whole host of regulations, which can be, aviation is one of the most highly regulated that exists in the US at least. But there are lots of different ways and flavors of that. So I think just trying to do a little bit of that research, if that's the one thing that you're kind of hanging your hat on, like I just would love to work with aviation clients, then great, like do some research around that and see what that would look like, because it does tend to have a broader, host of responsibilities within that type of practice group at most firms.
Well, and there's one other way, Wilson, my prior work, I think often divided along these lines of high tech. Okay, that's kind of an industry vertical, or life sciences, but this idea of client type. I like to work with small companies. I would prefer to work with big brand name companies, Fortune 50. Is that another way to at least start thinking about firms and looking at a division between firms?
For sure, for sure. I mean, most firms, you got to remember the public website is designed for the public or prospective clients. So a lot of the times the firms is going to make it look like they specialize in everything, and they can help very early stage founders all the way through mature public companies.
Right.
The reality is much different. So for that, you can do a combination of things. I like to say, you can use online resources with the caveat they're not always foolproof. Things like the vault guides and Reddit, what people say on there, you got to take with a grain of salt a little bit. But if you've decided, for instance, you really want to work with startups, founders, to figure out which firms, make that more of their specialty, you're going to want to talk to real people. So for instance, if you go to Berkeley, try to find some Berkeley alums at some of these firms. Even if you're not interviewing yet, if you're just thinking of applying, I would find if an alum of one of my, current student of one of my alma maters reached out to me, undergrad or law school, with a thoughtful question like, hey, I really, really think that I want to focus on working with startups. Like, tell me, how robust is that practice at your firm? Did you do that? What can you tell me? And even if I couldn't answer the question, for a really targeted and thoughtful email like that, I would take the time to respond and either refer them to someone who could answer it, or give them another resource, or tell them, go look here. So there are lots of ways to do that if it seems overwhelming or confusing based on what the websites say. I don't want to name names of firms, as I would miss many that have different specialties, but yeah, I mean, ours will say on the site, we call it circles of client. The first circle is the founder startup, second circle is mature private company, and third circle is the later stage public company. And we do represent all different types of clients throughout each circle, but not every firm does. And yeah, word on the street might be different than the way that the firm is trying to promote itself. So you want to see if you can get some of that insight.
Well, that's the reason, it's great to be able to talk to the individual lawyers, get a view of their day, their week, their month, their year. What does it look like? And you don't always have to lead those conversations. Mixers, networking events are a great place just to listen to other people's conversations and understand, not in a creepy, I'm eavesdropping way, but usually in a small group, you can listen in and see how people explain their practices and how they explain their days. That may be the only true way to understand a firm. I've a partner for a lot of years, and I had difficulty understanding all the different niches and practices within my firm.
Yes.
It's the reason firms have partner retreats, so they can get to know each other and understand what the practice really looks like on all of these areas. The practice of law is so specialized these days in big firms that it's hard to follow everything.
Definitely, definitely. I think that's great advice to go to the mixers, and especially if they're coming to your school, they're right there. Just go talk to them. You can, to prep for those, try to think up a couple of broad questions that you would ask, based on your interests, hopefully, but of any lawyer, any firm representative to get a conversation going. But generally, people who attend these things are used to it. They know it might feel a little awkward for law students, and we expect that. We're not judging you. So it's okay to attend and like you said, Wayne, like just kind of maybe listen in on what another student is asking. It might also prompt a question for you to then follow up with. And
Right.
that's expected.
Well, and the mixers are a great low pressure environment. It's not an interview. Um,
It's really
it's
not.
because I guess all of us have been there trying to figure this out, and nobody wants to recruit you into a job that you're going to hate because you'll leave. You won't enjoy it and you'll leave. So, and plus, lawyers love to tell you about themselves. So all you have to do is start that conversation. You'll learn everything you need to know about their practice area.
Oh yeah,
Um,
they love to
two,
talk about that.
so two good questions, and you'll learn everything you need to know about the tax
Probably more than
transactional
you wanted.
practice.
Yeah.
Um, though again, I go back to the tax transactional practice. I try to not ask tax questions, but I learned more from watching students talk to a tax transactional lawyer than I'd ever seen. And I'd spent my life in emerging companies, and like, that is a really interesting position. I've never been exposed to that before. So it shows you that there's a lot to be learned. So,
Definitely.
well, thank you for your time. Thank you, Wilson, for giving some more time for this. I think I'll leave you with one question. I said your title, your position isn't typical in law firms, though it probably should be. When law students are looking for someone to ask, and maybe they don't want to talk to the lawyers directly, um, should they be looking for this kind of position, or the recruiting department? Is that the place to go with questions, saying I'd be interested in learning about this kind of work? Is there someone I could talk to, or will someone be at a mixer? How do they get in touch with the right person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best way would be at least to start with the recruiting department, because part of their job is to make sure that you're quickly connected to the right person to answer your
Okay.
question. And you can just say, I'm interested in how this works. It could be that they had already planned on having, say for instance, you've already accepted the offer. They had already planned on having an intro to the office like mine during the summer. Or maybe not, and you just want to be connected. I also used to tell my students, I might get in trouble for saying this, but if you're not sure about an offer you receive, or you get multiple, say, and you're having a hard time comparing, you can, even if you've already received the offer and done with your interviews, you can ask for a second look. You can go back, like ask the recruiters, could I talk to, you should have a specific ask, either a junior associate in that group that I'm most interested in, or a partner, or a career development professional or PD person, if you have PD means professional development, sorry. And if you want, to learn a little bit more about the culture of the firm, what are some of the values and are they kind of living them in the way that you would like, you can ask a little bit more candid questions once you have an offer already in hand. So I wouldn't do that for every single one, and certainly don't, make it your job. But if you are really struggling and there's something else you want to know, reach out to recruiting and they will help you connect you to someone.
Wonderful. It's always good advice. I think the thing I repeat over and over again is the recruiting department is your best source of reliable knowledge. The lawyers may provide you knowledge, may not be right. So the recruiters know best. They're always the right resource. So, well, with that, I want to thank you, and I look forward to learning more and seeing how this position develops.
Likewise, thank you, Wayne.
Take care.